Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here today for this episode of SCRS Talks. Today, I have the distinct honor of interviewing Sarah Tweedy, Vice President, Clinical Operations Head of Vaccines, and Liz Rogers, Vice President and Head of Global Site and Study Operations, both with Pfizer, as we talk about Clinical Trials Day and what that means to an organization who really spearheaded the development of COVID-19 vaccines in the United States and really ran their trials globally to make this possible. We're again honored to have the two of them here as we talk through really what Clinical Trials Day means to the two of them and some exciting things that they see for the future of clinical research. So with that, Sarah and Liz, thank you both so much for being here. We really, really appreciate your time today and are excited to hear what you have to say about Clinical Trials Day and the future of clinical research.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. My name is Jimmy Bechtel, and I'm SCRS's Vice President of Site Engagement. And with that, we will go ahead and get started with the interview. So Liz and Sarah, how is Pfizer celebrating Clinical Trials Day this year?
Well, we always take the opportunity to recognize clinical trial professionals on this day. And this year, we'll be reaching out again to express our gratitude to our investigator sites and staff globally. But this year is special, right? And we want to thank and recognize all of our sites for their tremendous efforts and perseverance. There were some real heroic efforts on behalf of the sites last year that participated in the COVID vaccine study, but actually the vast majority of our sites continued to work very hard throughout the entire year, continuing research across all of our therapy areas. And I mean, clearly it was a really, really challenging year when much of life and everything else was on pause. So, during lockdowns and, every city, every country was under different restrictions. But I think what's really key is how our sites really recognized that patients' needs didn't go away and that research needed to go on. And, they were really supporting the participants that were already involved in studies as well as continuing to look for new participants in our trials. So, and I have to say it's great to see that so much about clinical research and clinical trials in the media these days and the importance of this work. So, that's really exciting as well. And our site should be very, very proud of the work they do.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? I mean, we're so proud of the work that we're doing at Pfizer, and it's all a partnership. It's all based on those investigator sites, a global footprint of investigator sites, because so there's a lot that we talk about and often talk about in terms of driving and advancing the science. We're conducting the trials, we're gathering the data, and that's all all work that we do with our site staff and in great partnership with them. But also when you get down to the site level, every single site is really embedded and dedicated to their local communities, and the way that they interact with their local communities, the way that they start to bring them in and raise the understanding and awareness of clinical research is really important. So this is an opportunity for us to also celebrate that. And then, of course, there are all of our colleagues at Pfizer who dedicate themselves and their work, their careers to clinical trials. And so we're also doing some stuff internally to celebrate. So our Chief Development Officer, Rod McKenzie, has started something this morning, inviting everyone to take a selfie and post it in some of our media spaces. Our kind of hashtag is Science Doesn't Stop with hashtag CTD 2021. So he started that this morning, and it's just a way for us to sort of engage internally as well as with our external partners to really kind of stop and recognize and celebrate this day. Because as Liz said, we've done so much has happened over this last year. It's been the biggest challenge any of us have ever had to rise to, and it's good to sort of stop and take a minute to celebrate.
Absolutely. And I continue to commend you and both of your teams in the tremendous effort that they also must have had to put forward, and the challenges and adversity they worked through amidst what everyone else was going through with COVID-19. And you raise a good point, Liz, in your earlier comments around how it's not just, we focus so much on COVID-19 trials, right? But it's all the rest of the trials and the rest of the sites that were still participating in Pfizer's research that are equally important in those patients and their journey through what they had to do here. So it's awesome to hear such an integrated approach to how you did that and what you all are doing to celebrate Clinical Trials Day. And you both touched on this a little bit, and I guess teased it for us. But can you tell me a little bit about Pfizer's journey through COVID-19 and some of the specifics on how you all got through this tremendous challenge to our industry?
Yes, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting, of course, because we've got a large group in China, and particularly in Wuhan, we have a number of staff. So when the COVID outbreak started, our first concern was actually focused on China and business continuity of our trials running in China, and for our staff, particularly those our CSTAs in Wuhan. So that was our first sort of focus. But then obviously, as COVID started to sort of bleed and expand beyond China, because I think we were so involved and thinking about that business continuity for China, we were ahead of the game in thinking, what if, what happens when, what do we need to do next? So, I mean, we initially started with an overall assessment of our portfolio and how we could maintain the safety of our participants worldwide. We looked into all the logistics, how we could maintain supply chains, how we could get therapies direct to patients if sites or cities were in lockdown and unable to travel to sites. So, you know, I had a really holistic approach to what we needed to do. And we actually made the decision to pause recruitment for a few weeks for the majority of our studies to really help try to relieve the burden on our sites, knowing that many site staff were actually being called to serve into their local communities to actually deal with the burdens of COVID that were presenting at that time. We also reviewed our protocols and put emergency measures in place to allow for greater flexibility around participant visits. So for the studies that, you know, we didn't stop patients continuing in our trials. We paused new recruitment into our trials, but we obviously needed to take care of all of those ongoing participants in our trials. So we really took the opportunity to see what we could do in terms of our protocols, to put additional safety measures in place that we could maintain the safety of those participants. And, you know, we looked at telehealth. We took advantages of telehealth. We looked at home visits, and we put some home visits in place for certain trials. And all of this was putting the safety of our participants and site staff first, really. And then we also did other things, like we expanded our virtual monitoring capabilities and the ability for us to work with our sites in a more remote fashion. And of course, we also spent a lot of time developing a vaccine, but also working on antiviral therapeutic options too. But Sarah, perhaps you can talk more about the amazing work that went into the vaccine study.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the COVID vaccine program was the ultimate challenge. If you go back to early 2020, as Liz said, we were really focused on our colleagues and our portfolio, which was an incredibly full portfolio of work, and we were trying to navigate how to conduct those trials safely in a COVID environment. And then on top of that, we were asked to attempt what initially felt like Mission Impossible. We've gone on to coin it Mission Possible. but it was essentially to develop a vaccine safely with really robust quality. That was kind of the cornerstone of everything we did, but also in a time frame that was just so different to anything that we've ever been able to achieve before. So, I have to say, for me personally, it was just this remarkable reminder of how incredibly talented the colleagues at Pfizer are, how incredibly talented and dedicated our partners at sites and at our partner vendor organizations are. It was really this kind of all hands on deck. How do we solve for this approach? Everybody just rolled up their sleeves, absolutely dedicated themselves in a way that, kind of above and beyond in every single way. Every day, folks brought their A game. They were working hard. They were working long hours. Our sites recognized that there was great opportunity in having weekend visits and evening visits. And they just stepped up and did it. We had this kind of constant feedback mechanism with our sites, which really enabled us to truly have a finger on the pulse, so that we could in real time recognize if something wasn't working and adjust. That was because we were getting feedbacks from our sites. They were telling us what was good, what was bad, and we were able to sort of solve for it. So it was just an incredible journey. Really helped us to understand how, kind of learn and test and understand how to navigate research in the COVID world, but also ultimately enabled us to deliver that mission impossible, to deliver that vaccine. But all of that, we touched on a little bit as we've talked already today. We were working in an incredibly different environment. Every single one of us had our lives turned upside down in 2020. And so not only, we recognize that not only were we trying to develop something, develop something in an unprecedented fashion, but those individuals, every person who was dedicating themselves and their time to this, was also trying to navigate their own new normal, homeschooling children, trying to figure out how to buy groceries, the kind of the toilet paper joke. We were trying to do all of those things. And so we recognized we needed to make sure that the work environment for our colleagues, for our staff, for all of our team, including, the folks that are at site, could we work in a way that was recognizing that our personal lives were also sort of, as I say, had gone through a fair amount of upheaval. So we looked at, different ways to communicate, ways to support more flexible working practices, recognizing that every individual needs, needs their quote unquote cup filled in a different way. And so we've spent a lot of time over the year trying to figure out how we do that for our colleagues, for everybody that we work with, as well as really progressing a very complicated portfolio that included, a little old vaccine to protect us against COVID-19.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Liz and Sarah, I don't know if you know this or how intimately aware you might be about this, but Pfizer is a regular recipient of the SCRS Eagle Award, and it's because of those. It's the Eagle Award around being the sponsor of choice for, as voted on and by the clinical research sites. And it's that dedication to those open lines of communication that you talked a little bit about, Sarah, and how you all enable those. And really that's the desire of the sites, is to have those open lines of communication, for that communication to be honest, open, and constant with our sponsor partners. And that's really what sets companies like you above the rest and earns you awards like the Eagle Award. So it's great to hear how COVID really may have presented itself as an opportunity where that might have fallen by the wayside. Because we've seen a lot of companies really internalize a lot of the work that they do to try to, bootstrap and buckle down to try to make change and get through this. But instead, it's great to hear that you all took a vastly different approach and almost took your openness and those communication lines and really ramped them up. even as a result of COVID-19. So that's fantastic to hear, and really encouraging as maybe a takeaway from this talk for our other sponsor and CRO partners on the line as something to look forward to doing and enabling within their organizations. Definitely, I would argue, and I'm sure you two would do the same, as something that enabled your ability to get a vaccine to market as rapidly as you all did. And I want to ask then, what does clinical research and working in clinical research mean to the two of you?
Well, so for me, I mean, it's always been about the people. It's been working in a global environment. It's working with science, all of those things. And I guess this past year was just an unbelievable experience and a culmination of what felt like, for me, my entire career building to serve for that very moment. And I feel so very, very, very Pfizer proud and so privileged to work for Pfizer, but to work in the field that I work in, and to have been able to really make a difference. And I couldn't be prouder of my organization, of my group particularly, Global Sites and Study Operations, because we were at the forefront of that, working with our sites every day, supporting them, helping them through the whole COVID situation, and driving that really, really, really large, really, really, really fast, really exciting vaccine study that Sarah just spoke to. So, you know, what does working in clinical research mean to me? It means so much, and it's just been so great to actually give something back to a career that's given me so much.
Yeah, it's true. Liz's organization really was, as she said, on the front lines, on the forefront, just doing incredible work. And I think, you know, for a lot of us in the same field, it's been very similar to what Liz said. You know, it's almost like we talk a lot about this having been, you know, a moment that we'll always remember. We'll always look back on 2020. There were some awful things from a career perspective. It was an incredible opportunity to really make a difference. And so I think for me, clinical research does mean that. It means bringing hope to patients. You know, we, from a public health perspective, working in vaccines, which is my area of focus, there is an opportunity to make a huge difference in a lot of ways. 2020 really was an amplified version of that, you know, the opportunity to really spend our daily, you know, our day-to-day working towards a goal that was going to was really going to make a difference to, you know, everybody's lives in some way. And you know, so that hope was important. I have to say though, for me, clinical research is also about the big public health pieces. It's about the difference we can make down to the individual level as well, and the hope that we can bring. I have a child with a rare disease, and it's, you know, it's incredibly rare. She's the only child in our county, in our part of the state with this disease. But there are incredible men and women out there who have developed a solution for her. And so she continues to thrive and grow because of the work that they did. And their work is going to impact, you know, a very small part of the, you know, sort of part of the population, but it's just so important, speaking as, you know, the parent of an individual who really benefits from it. So, you know, every day we come to work and we're able to contribute to making that difference to the individuals, you know, on the small scale or on the large scale. And I think that's, you know, that's really what it's about.
It's those personal connections that so many of us have in clinical research that really do power a lot of the work that we do. So it's so refreshing, Sarah, to hear, you know, continued stories around that. It's also really refreshing for me to hear you both talk about how the site and the patients are really truly at the center of what we're doing here, and how that's what it means to you both, and driving that forward, and how everyone really rallied together during COVID-19 help make a lot of those changes and a lot of those advancements. I know this goes really without saying for all of our listeners, as well as those of us here on the call today, that the sites are really at the center of everything that all of us do here. And it's that the COVID-19 vaccine development program, I'm sure it sounds like it was no exception to that mentality. So again, thank you and applaud you for maintaining that perspective. I'd ask now, what has distilled out that you believe will be important for the future of clinical research? This is looking back, right? What new changes and things that we had to adjust to that will be good for us as we continue to move forward?
So, I think we've learned a lot this year, and we can talk more about what that looks like moving into the future. But I think, looking back at the last year, there's been a lot of the practical implications. How do you monitor data at a site when you can't be on site because we're trying to protect the others who are there? Those bits and pieces. But I think the other thing for me, having worked, and it's been a shift that we've seen coming, but we've really recognized it through the COVID-19 vaccine programs as well, is that we have to represent the populations who are going to be most impacted by the disease that we're studying or the disease we're looking to treat or prevent. Making sure that we represent the most highly impacted populations. And if that's the minority populations, making sure that we're really building networks to be able to reach the right folks so that we are, we're representing. So looking at not only building out diversity, but understanding how we can reach into underserved communities. Do we have sites in all of the right places, or is there more that we can do to really build out those networks so that we have a truly, a truly sort of global footprint, or in the US, a well-distributed footprint into all of the right communities. And I think there's also value in understanding how we work with at-risk, how we conduct our at-risk studies. So that includes pediatric studies and all of the other at-risk populations. How do we work that into our development cycle so that we are de-risking at the right time, but also making sure that we're gathering the data that we need to be able to serve those populations as quickly as possible? So we've had a good opportunity to really, look at that over the last year. I think we need to look more and work more towards the future to really represent in that space.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Sarah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Again, yes, I completely agree with where we're headed in the industry and the great work that we will continue to do. As we begin to wrap things up, again, thank you so much. But I'll love to end on this question here, a positive outlook for us as we look to what the future looks like and what you two believe the future of clinical research will look like.
Well, I think we have such an exciting opportunity ahead of us in terms of clinical research. I think, as devastating as COVID is and has been, it's also afforded us a much greater understanding, or at least afforded the general public a much broader understanding of what clinical trials are and how important they are in developing medicines. And I think, having shared that on a much broader scale, and there's that much greater understanding in the community, I think that's exciting for us in this industry as we seek to run, more trials, or at least that, the trials that we've always run, but now there'll be a much more educated population out there to be able to recruit from. So I think that's an exciting part of clinical research that we can look forward to. But Sarah, I mean, there's definitely there's no going back. That's for sure. So
yeah. That is absolutely true. Yeah, there's no going back, and I agree. I mean, I think the visibility and understanding of the the world's perspective of what a clinical trial is completely new and different. It's not often that you see your work discussed on kind of the national media channels. But yeah, there's no going back. We have so much opportunity now to learn from the way that we manage trials, and that includes the COVID vaccine trial. So that we can forge, new and more effective ways of working. We've talked a lot through this discussion about the value of our relationship with our clinical trial sites, and that is really central. So how do we take that and continue to build on the philosophy that we are better together? The combined effort is stronger than individual effort. Build on that, build on those partnerships, but also, how do we use technology moving forward? We were forced, our hand was forced somewhat by COVID. Last year, we had to look at ways to monitor remotely, access data remotely, talk to our sites and clinical trial participants remotely. So how do we take everything we've learned and use, really leverage that moving forward? So that's an important piece, and I think it's something we have to focus on. We have to focus on doing the right trials, having the right study visits. There's more that we can do there now, having understood, what is truly important in terms of the data we need to gather. And then I think, the last piece, we've talked a lot about our sites and we've talked a little bit about our study participants, but I think the other piece in the communication channel is really understanding the true value and keeping our clinical trial participants informed, making sure they feel invested in the clinical trial they're participating in, making sure they have a really good idea, a good understanding of what their path looks like. I think clinical trial participants, and we've seen this, we've seen this over and over again in the COVID vaccine space, but clinical trial participants can be our advocates. They can reach into their communities, share their experience, and that will only help to strengthen the opportunity in clinical research and strengthen our ability to conduct the right trials to get medicines and vaccines to patients faster, which is ultimately what we're trying to do here.
You're exactly right. It would be fantastic for us to be able to enable our patients and our sites to be their own advocates and to advocate on behalf of clinical research and really spread the word in their communities of what a positive experience they had and how rewarding it had been for them. That is the ultimate experience we want to be able to provide those patients and those sites. So I think that's a brilliant way to end our talk here. So Sarah, Liz, thank you so much again for your time today. Thank you even more for your dedication to our patients and to our sites as they worked through the challenges of 2020 and they helped a great company like Pfizer develop amongst others, the vaccine that is starting to help get our planet on a path to a brighter future and come bring us out of the COVID-19 pandemic. I realize that other parts of the world are continuing to struggle tremendously with COVID-19. So we're hopeful that as time goes on, we'll see continued positive trending. But I do know that things are looking good for the United States, and that is in large part thanks to the work that you and your great teams at Pfizer have done to help us advance. So I felt there was no better team to interview, being such a strong partner with SCRS, an Eagle Award sponsor of choice from our clinical research sites and ones that developed a vaccine that is proving very effective and very safe in lightning speed. So thank you both so much for your time today.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. It's been good to be here.
Thank you. And again, a huge thanks to all of our sites that work with us day in, day out, because we couldn't do what we do without them. So thank you.